Hi Pilgrims! I'm back today with yet another Camino video. So I've been doing some videos on the lesser traveled Camino routes. My last one I talked about the Chemin du Puy, which is a Camino route in France. And today I'm going to be talking about the Camino San Salvador, which is a shorter Camino route. It's about 122 kilometers in Spain. It runs from the city of León, which sits along the Camino Francés, and then it goes northwards, again about 122 kilometers up to Oviedo, which is the start of the Camino Primitivo. So this is kind of a short little Camino that runs from south to north, linking those two cities in Spain. I just want to start by saying the Camino San Salvador is gorgeous. This is a really, really beautiful Camino. I walked it back in 2016, so already it's been, about 5.5 years since I walked. But I loved it so much at the time, and it's a Camino that's on my list to go back and walk again. I think, the biggest thing when I think about the San Salvador is that it is one of the more challenging Camino routes. So I think it's known as one of the most beautiful, if not the most beautiful, but also pretty challenging. So, it's at 122 kilometers. I think most pilgrims break it down into 5 stages. That's what I did. It is definitely doable in 4 stages, but then you're going to be looking at least 1 or 2 longer stages. Some of that's just going to be due to the available accommodation. 5 stages, you have some more options to walk. I would say that probably if you're looking at 5 stages, it's kind of the middle section, days 2, 3, maybe part of 4, that are going to be the most beautiful. It runs through the mountains. It's the Cordillera mountain range, and I might have the pronunciation totally wrong. But that middle section, you're really in the mountains. It's pretty isolated and remote and just so stunningly beautiful. If you have nice weather, the views are just outstanding. The beginning and kind of end of the route are a little more flat. I know that the walk, kind of the last section into Oviedo, you're going to be walking on more asphalt, has some ups and downs, but I think the beginning and the end are a little bit easier. It's that middle section that has a lot of up and downs and is going to be trickier. So one thing I think to note about this route is the availability of accommodations. In non-COVID times anyway, it is possible to stay at albergues all throughout the walk. So when I did my 5 stages, I had planned to stay in an albergue every night, and I would have every night, except there was one where the albergue had just closed due to bed bugs, so I had to stay in a little hotel or a pension in the small village. I know with COVID, and especially last year, the municipal albergues were closed. And the reports that I'm seeing are that they're not open yet, but at the time of this recording, it's February 2022. So I think in the off season, especially in the mountains, I don't know that the albergues would be open anyway. So I would say for any pilgrims planning to walk, maybe this spring or summer or fall, to keep an eye on things to see if those albergues open up. If they don't, it's still very possible to walk this Camino. I know pilgrims were walking it last summer and last fall. Sometimes you just have to stay in hotels or pensions. It's going to be more expensive than albergues, but it's still not wildly expensive. So it is possible to do this. And even during COVID, you'll have to check it out, but it should be possible. My biggest recommendation, I think, for this Camino is, and it's something that I learned that I would do differently next time, but it's to have a working phone. So maybe to have a SIM card in your phone that can allow you to call and make some calls. I didn't when I walked, in 2016, this was my 3rd year of walking Caminos, but my previous Caminos had been the Camino Francés, the Norte, and Primitivo. And for all of those, I just kind of walked, I showed up, the albergues were always open, there were people around. But on the San Salvador, a couple times would arrive in a village or town, get to the albergue, and it was closed. The hospitalero wasn't there. There were no other pilgrims around, but there was usually like a number on the door to call so someone could come and open up the albergue. I didn't have a working phone, and I always figured it out. In one place I found the tourism office and they called ahead for me. I found a payphone in a couple places, so I was always able to manage, but I would say this would be an important Camino to have a working phone for, so that you can call if needed. I also think because of the sort of isolated and more remote nature of it, just for safety, I think it could be a good idea to have a working phone. The waymarking on this route I thought it was really good. When I walked, I don't remember having any trouble, so I did just fine. I had pretty clear conditions for most of the way, although the last two stages, it was a little rainy and overcast, and still, I found waymarkers just fine. So I do think, if you're concerned about navigating and are there going to be enough arrows and signs, for the most part, I think, this route is pretty well waymarked. There are a few options for guides for this route. I think the best is a resource and a little guide that Ender put out. So Ender is a Spanish man who lives somewhere in the area around the San Salvador. And I think in the last number of years, he's put a tremendous amount of effort into waymarking the way, into working with the different people along the route to make it more accessible to pilgrims. And he put together this little guide, which one of the Camino Forum members translated into English. And I'll kind of link to that down below so that you can have it. I can't remember the year that he wrote the guide or that it came out. It might have been around 2016, so around when I walked. It may have been updated a little bit since I used it, but I think for the most part, the information that's in there is still pretty standard and applicable to walking today. I thought one of the best parts about this guide is that it has a ton of photos so that you can kind of visually see the areas that are mentioned on each stage. And what I actually did was, with my own phone, I took a picture kind of each page of the guide so that I had the photos to refer to as I walked along. I think that really helped me at the time. Again, I didn't have any trouble with getting lost, but that guide was a very valuable resource. Otherwise, for this Camino, I'd say, there are some towns and villages you go through. There are some shops to get food and for supplies and for meals, but I would definitely say it would be important to have a little backup food with you, just in case stores are closed. There are some longer stretches where you're not going to run into any services, so I think it's a good idea. Also, being in the mountains, you never know, so good to have a little backup food. I remember water sources being pretty plentiful throughout the route, so I don't think that's as much of a concern. But mostly, this is a Camino where, again, if it's, most people walk 4, 5, 6 days, but just through really stunning scenery. I do think that middle section might get my vote for the most beautiful Camino days that I've walked. And if not the most, it's right up there. I think also one nice thing about this route is that there are some really nice options to link it up with other Caminos. I think a splendid Camino would be to start in León, which is on the Camino Francés, go, those 4 or 5 days, 6 days up to Oviedo, and then from Oviedo, continue on the Camino Primitivo to Santiago. 2.5, 3 weeks of walking, that would be a gorgeous combination. Or you could walk the San Salvador up to Oviedo and then continue up to the Norte and kind of do the last maybe couple of weeks on the Norte. It's another nice option as well. So if you haven't heard of the San Salvador before, I hope this was a nice introduction. Below, I'm going to put, a bunch of links to different things and resources where you can find more. Several years ago, I wrote up a pretty detailed blog post about my experience on the San Salvador, but also kind of a guide that had some extra resources. I broke down some stage options on how to split up the walk. I'm also going to link to some other YouTube videos I found. Some of you, probably many of you, know of Efrén Gonzalez. He's probably the most successful Camino YouTuber. He just walked this route last year in 2021, and he's got some great videos. I'm also going to link to Sara. She's another YouTuber. She's walked a ton of Camino routes, so her stuff is always a great resource as well. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will be back soon to talk about more Camino routes. I forgot to mention about other pilgrims on this route, so I'm going to add just a little bit at the end of this video. This is going to be a more isolated Camino route. I do think more pilgrims have started to walk this route over the years, but when I walked, I had days when I didn't see another pilgrim on the path. In fact, I think there was only one stage where I actually ran into other pilgrims. In the evenings, I was all alone in an albergue one night, first time that ever happened. And I think there were a handful of other pilgrims on the other nights. So, but it all depends. I think my first At my first stage, the hospitalero at the albergue said that the last few days have been quiet, but the previous week there was one night that he had 18 pilgrims. So I think it all just depends on your stages and when you're walking and who else is out there. Generally, though, I think you will see other pilgrims, but this isn't a route. I'd say that if you're really, really looking forward to pilgrim connection and community and want to be assured of being with others on the path, I don't think this is a route that you can be guaranteed to find it. So just know heading in that if you choose this route, it's going to be much more quiet and a route for solitude. Okay, now that's really it. I'll be back soon.